Okay, I'm doing it. 3 ingredients, that's all you needed to survive months at sea, march across battlefields, and sometimes break a tooth. Today we're making the survival biscuit that fed sailors, soldiers, and explorers for over 2,000 years. Welcome to, or welcome back to A Bite Out of History, the show where we cook, taste, and explore the history of the foods that shaped our past. And today we are making something very special. We're making hardtack. It might be the simplest food in military history. 3 ingredients, that's it. Just flour, water, and salt. No yeast, no butter, no sugar. Yet this humble biscuit fed Roman soldiers, pirate crews, Civil War armies, and explorers crossing oceans.
If you like this type of content, you should like and subscribe.
Some biscuits were said to last years, even decades. But there's one big question historians and soldiers have argued about for centuries. Was hardtack actually edible, or was it simply just for survival? Today we're going to make it the traditional way and find out for ourselves. First, we'll preheat our oven to 375 Fahrenheit. Then, in a bowl, we will combine 2 cups flour, 1 teaspoon salt. We'll mix that together. Now we'll slowly add the 3/4 cup of water while stirring. We're looking for a very stiff dough. Hardtack dough should feel dense, almost like pasta dough. If it's too dry, add a tiny splash of water, but not too much, because we don't want to make it soft. Because soft dough means moisture, and moisture means spoilage, and moisture is our enemy, and so is spoilage. Historically, this would have been done in huge batches in military bakeries or ship kitchens, but we're just doing it for us, so we're gonna make a small batch here on our counter. Now we will roll the dough to about 1/2 inch thick. Hardtack was usually cut into squares because squares stacked neatly in crates and barrels. Cut the dough into 3-inch squares. Next, we'll place the biscuits onto a baking sheet, and we'll bake them at 375 Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. Then we'll flip them over and bake another 30 minutes. The goal here isn't browning. The goal is drying them out completely. While our hardtack is baking, let's talk about why this biscuit became one of the most important foods in history. Hardtack dates back over 2,000 years. Ancient Roman soldiers carried a version of it called bacalaureum, a hard, durable bread ration designed to survive long military campaigns. Because when an army is marching hundreds of miles, fresh bread just isn't an option. By the 1500s, hardtack had become essential for sailors. Ships traveling across the Atlantic might be at sea for months. Fresh food spoiled quickly. But hardtack, well, it could last the entire journey. Barrels filled with thousands of biscuits were stored deep inside the ship. Sailors had some colorful nicknames for it. Tooth dullers, molar breakers, sheet iron, which should tell you something about the texture. There was one very common problem. Over time, the biscuits often became infested with weevils, tiny beetles that burrowed into the flour. Sailors had a trick. They would tap the biscuits on the table to knock the bugs out, or dunk it in coffee to soften it and float the bugs to the surface. That's disgusting. Some sailors even joked that the bugs were just extra protein. Hardtack became especially famous during the American Civil War. Union soldiers received huge boxes of biscuits, stamped with the bakery name and the year they were made. Sometimes soldiers complained the biscuits were years old. One soldier wrote in his diary,
"If you break them open and the worm is alive, then the biscuit is fresh."
Another soldier described them as worm castles. Not exactly a glowing food review. Imagine opening a tin of food and realizing it was over 100 years old. And it was not moldy, not rotten, not even unrecognizable, just sitting there, waiting. That was exactly what was found in Antarctica, inside a wooden structure built in 1910 that served as British explorer Robert Falcon Scott's base camp. The base camp didn't feel abandoned so much as it felt paused. When conservation teams entered it decades later, they didn't find collapse, disarray, or decay. They found order. Clothes were still folded. Scientific instruments were still laid out, as though they were about to be used. Boots sat by the door, next to each other, looking as though they were still warm from just being taken off. It felt as if the men had just stepped outside and might return at any moment. And on one of those shelves sat a tin of hardtack biscuits. Scott's expedition set out to reach the South Pole. They faced temperatures far below zero. In fact, some plateaus in Antarctica have recorded temperatures as low as negative 133 degrees Fahrenheit. So for a comparison, dry ice sits at around negative 109 degrees Fahrenheit. There were endless white horizons and winds that stripped heat from the body almost instantly. And you see, Scott and his team were in a race. They were trying to be the first people to reach the South Pole, but they weren't the only ones. Roald Amundsen was racing them. And the difference between victory and defeat came down to a decision that didn't seem dramatic at the time or very important. Amundsen used sled dogs, fast, efficient, built for that environment. Scott used ponies. And ponies weren't built for snow like that. So when they failed, his men ended up having to pull the sleds themselves. It worked until it didn't. Scott reached the South Pole in January 1912, and there, waiting for him and his team, was a huge celebration. Not really. It was a black tent, and inside was a note left by Amundsen. Calm, precise, almost emotionless. It confirmed what they feared. They weren't first.
As you are probably the first to reach this area after us, I will ask you kindly to forward this letter to King Haakon VII. If you can use any of the articles left in the tent, please do not hesitate to do so. With kind regards, wish you a safe return. Yours truly.
That night, Scott wrote in his diary, "Great God, this is an awful place." But the journey wasn't over. After everything they had endured, it wasn't enough. Now they had to turn around and do it all again, just to get back to their base camp, right? So, by the way, the distance from base camp to the South Pole, one way, was 800 miles. They traveled all of this on foot, only to realize they weren't the first. And then they had to turn around and face an 800-mile journey back in defeat. And that was when everything began to fall apart. As you can imagine, that's when the return became a slow collapse. The cold intensified. Their bodies began to fail. One by one, the men slowed. One by one, they stopped. And then there was Lawrence Oates. Oates was already suffering. His feet were badly frostbitten. He had gangrene apparently, and his strength was fading. He knew he was slowing the others down, but the team wouldn't leave him behind, so he made the decision for them. One morning, in the middle of a blizzard, he stepped outside the tent and said he was just going outside and maybe some time. He walked into the storm and never came back. His body was never found, and over time, Antarctica did what it always did. Snow buried the surface. Ice shifted layer after layer, built up over the years, over the decades. Somewhere out there beneath that frozen landscape, his body remains hidden under decades of ice. The rest pressed on, weaker each day. They came agonizingly close to survival. Scott and the last 2 members of his team died in their tents, just 11 miles from a supply depot. Close enough to imagine reaching it, but too far to survive the journey. The tent that they had died in, the bodies were still inside, preserved by the cold. The diary was still readable, and that was where, this whole story is truly fascinating and slightly unsettling. The Biscuits weren't there. They weren't in the tent that they died in. They were back at the base camp, sitting on a shelf, untouched, while the men died on the ice. The food remained behind them. And unlike the tent, the base camp sat undisturbed for decades. When teams entered it more than a century later, they found something extraordinary. Not ruin, preservation. Because Antarctica wasn't just cold, it was dry. And in that kind of environment, time barely moved. And inside that tin, the Biscuits were still there. Dry, solid, recognizable, unchanged, which created a strange contrast. The men were found within months, but the objects they left behind stayed. The food meant to keep them alive outlasted them. That was some of the history behind this little biscuit, this little hardtack biscuit. And strangely fascinating, but surprisingly, Antarctica wasn't the only place these biscuits endured. Long before they sat untouched in the cold, they were carried into a very different kind of hardship, not at the edge of the world, but on battlefields, much closer to home during the American Civil War. These same biscuits were carried by thousands of soldiers in the army of Abraham Lincoln. And unlike Antarctica, this was a place of heat, humidity, mud, movement, a place where almost everything else broke down, but not this. Half a world away, in 2 completely different extremes, it endured both. In the dry, frozen silence of Antarctica and in the wet, exhausting heat of war. And maybe that was what made the history of this little biscuit's journey to Antarctica so strange and fascinating to me, because hardtack, it did exactly what it was supposed to do in Antarctica. It survived, it endured. In extremes, it lasted where almost nothing else could. And yet, in the one moment where it mattered most, it wasn't there. This is the one time it failed as survival food, but it didn't fail because it couldn't do its job. It failed because it wasn't there when it mattered. It was left behind. And in the end, this wasn't just a story about a biscuit. It was a story about the people who carried it, the ones who pushed further than anyone before them, into places that promised nothing back in return. Because everything we understand about the world today exists because someone was willing to step into the unknown, and sometimes they didn't come back. It was hard not to wonder if something as small as this little biscuit, a little more food, a little more strength, maybe even a few more biscuits might have been enough to close the final 11 miles to that supply depot. But that was the nature of this kind of exploration. It asks you to give everything you had, and sometimes it costs everything. Well, that's just a little of the history of this little biscuit. The stories this thing could tell, it's pretty fascinating. Going based off of just how heavy it is and how small it is, I'm thinking it's going to be pretty hard. Oh, wow. I don't know, honestly, if I can eat this without something. I mean, we could We could try. Wow. Oh my gosh. And this is fresh. Okay. It has absolutely zero flavor. There's no way. I mean, it's not that bad. But you would definitely damage your teeth surviving. That's rough, man. I guess the moral of the story is survival food is survival food. It's not meant to be glamorous, luxurious, or anything like that. Because if you were really hungry, you would eat this in a heartbeat. Even with worms. Well, hold on. Whoa. Here's the one we just smashed together. Let's try this one. It's hot. Wow. You need to dunk this in something. My dog, luckily, my dog loves bread. Bubba's. So, this will be a great little treat for him. Pretty clean, neutral. There you go, bro. Take it on home. Bubba's, come here. It's a good dog. I'm Nick, and that's Hardtack. I'll see you next time, somewhere in the past.